the Canucks Capsuleers Chronicles. With us today we got Stitch Kaneland for an interview for the CSM 18, so stay tuned, we go right into it.
EVE Online. Lost 23,000 years in the future, our group of space Canucks are sorry in advance. I'm Ben, and
I'm Dan.
your Hoosers from the Great Wide North, here to decode the mysteries of wormholes, tame the unruly drones with a Timmy in our hands, and keep you, fellow capsuleers, in the loop about all things EVE Online, from Canada to the edge of New Eden. So grab your double, kick back, and let's dive into the Canucks Capsuleers Chronicles, where the only thing colder than space is the chills running down your back after a close encounter with a cloaked ship. So get ready, set, and about we go!
And welcome back. So today I'm with Stitch Kaneland, so welcome to the Canucks Capsuleer Chronicles. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure. For those of Canucks that do not know who you are, could you please present yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Stitch Kaneland, and I've been playing EVE since 2011. So I've had a fairly diverse background in going with, I started in high sec, obviously, but that didn't last very long. I got kind of picked up by a null sec guy, and then I lived in null sec for about 3.5 years. Transition to wanting to do something a little bit more solo or kind of get in a small gang area. So then I went to Faction Warfare Low Sec. Then Faction Warfare Low Sec kind of died because of some Citadel changes and things like that, and moved on to non-Faction Warfare Low Sec and kind of did a nomadic thing where I just kind of moved around a bunch of systems and lived there for a couple months at a time. And then eventually I moved on to Wormholes and joined Tuskers. And now... So I did Wormholes for about 3.5 years, and then I kind of dipped out, and now I'm back in kind of the Faction Warfare / nomadic playstyle. And so from there, a lot of what I was doing is that I take a lot of enjoyment in finding ships and fittings that people say are bad and find what they're good at, or just easy to get engagements in. And that kind of snowballed into me finding ways to really find and drill down on the strengths and weaknesses of certain ships or certain playstyles or issues with weapon systems, and over time that allowed me to make recommendations to CCP either through the old forums or through Reddit, and then CCP adopted those recommendations into actual changes in the game. And as of right now, I think we're right around 10 implementations of things put into the game.
That's actually really impressive.
10.
So, what would be your area of expertise? Like the things that you're quite unique in doing so.
Yeah, so I think my main areas of expertise, which is kind of broad, but I'll consolidate it into just solo, small gang, ship balance, and large scale ecosystem. So not necessarily a specific play style, but just the game as a whole. There's a lot of things that interconnect with each other, and through these recommendations I made over the years, you can kind of see how they play out, and it gives you a different idea on, okay, well, if you change something here, how's it going to affect over here? And so I'm just very mindful of how everything interacts, as I don't want to necessarily change something one area of space that's going to negatively affect another area of space, and just try and find the middle ground or the compromise as needed. Sometimes eventually things need to be nerfed. That's just how it goes. But I think there's a lot of wiggle room in between we can work with.
Nice. On your forum post, you describe yourself as a non-biased, neutral entity from Wormholes. Although, we really are delighted by the statement. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so when I lived in Wormholes, when we were with Tuskers, we lived in Wormholes, but, we weren't necessarily part of the big wormhole conglomerates, I guess you could say. Laserhawks and Turbo and all these other larger groups. We just live there. We wanted to we were mainly using it as a basing point to go out to roam nullsec, or we'd roam the wormholes themselves, roam the chain, have access to highsec, things like that. We'd also obviously, crab because we had a connected C5 static. So there's a lot of, just like nullsec, there's a lot of politics in the wormhole space. And so I just view myself as a neutral entity. I don't necessarily have any bias towards a specific play style or a specific, eviction, non-eviction kind of role. I'm just familiar with the mechanics, and again, going back to a large form ecosystem platform, I'm aware at least of, what are some of the issues in wormhole space, and if you change something in wormhole space or you change something in not related to wormhole space, how are they going to interact?
Nice. So you speaking about that earlier, but although you've never been on CSM, you might be the player that got the most real attention from CCP, as at about 10 of your ideas been implemented in the game as of now. So we're speaking, well, what would be the place on the CSM panel? How would you get more attention? What would that change as you're highly effective, as one can say?
Right. So I think it gives me access to kind of peer behind the veil and provide more direct recommendations, because a lot of my recommendations are happening after the fact. And, some of them I've mentioned ahead of time, like, for example, the Blops rebalance or, torpedo changes. Those kind of happened after the fact. But there's a lot of changes that I recommend that are recommended as the issue is being announced to us. So, for example, nullification changes or Navy battlecruiser, the new Navy battlecruisers, when they first got implemented, I made a post to say, actually, you should probably change some of these things so that they're actually useful. And then, they got changed. So being on the CSM allows me to provide that feedback immediately, while we're in those meeting rooms or while we're finding out this information. So that way CCP is then releasing something that feels more fleshed out and more exciting, and not just, here's new ships that kind of look like they suck. And then people have to, then we have to bring them up to speed for the final release. And I think to some extent that kind of throws people off. It delays the excitement. So that's what I would kind of bring to actually being on the CSM, is being able to provide that direct input.
Nice. So maybe a little bit off-topic question here. We know that there's been talks and development concerning new destroyers. Have you been doing some Reddit posts concerning them in the last months that we should go there and read about them?
So I haven't done any Reddit posts on the Navy destroyers. Is it maybe that they're kind of taking over the Navy complexes, or what's the specific issues with them that you've been hearing?
Well, actually, they are non-existent. That's what's going to be happening in the we guess the next expansion, because they've been on the on the Eve radar in the last months. We saw that I think it's the Guristas is gonna get one, and the Angels.
The pirate destroyers.
Yeah,
my bad. I was for some reason thinking the Navy destroyers.
Sorry, my fault.
So I wasn't. I kind of am. I kind of need to see how they're actually going to go before I make a post on what I think they're going to do. I don't want to guide CCP's hand on everything that they do. I'm still an Eve player. I still want to be surprised on how they're going to do things. And I think sometimes when they do things, it's a surprise to me in a potentially a better or different perspective. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. We'll go with that. It doesn't necessarily need to be something that they need to follow what I'm thinking they should be. And again, them being destroyers is very unique, because are we just going to get, for example, like the Grissa's destroyer, are we just going to get a really fat worm, or are we going to get something completely different where maybe it's more missile focused and drone focused, or vice versa? So I kind of want to see how that plays out first before you know, I make recommendations if I even need to make recommendations.
Nice. So, what's your idea on how to crush rentals empire and the need to own large swatches of space?
So, crushing is maybe too strong of a term, but I would like us to diverge from rental empires, and I think for that to happen, we need to provide an alternative, which is passive income needs to return. And passive income does a few things. One, it provides certain areas of space that are lucrative. And having space that's lucrative means people want to own that space, which means they want to fight over it. And there's a very severe lack of objectives and things to fight over in EVE right now. You know, all space is pretty much homogenized right now. You have, for the most part, every system, you know, you can throw in citadels, refineries into, and everyone has access to pretty much the same things. Of course, there's some variances, and certain things provide certain better resources, but for the most part, you can throw all the same structures and all the same systems and get most of the same things out of it, and no one really wants to fight over just having the same things. So if you reintroduce passive income, again, that gives a reason for people to fight over things, and then because of that, there's less of a need to have rental empires. Now, that alone obviously is not going to make people stop, so you need to apply some external pressure to, you know, kind of punish these groups that are overextending, you know, just taking these large swaths of space and not really doing anything in it with them except putting renters in them, and then just saving those renters anytime they come under attack because they can project across the map with ansiblexes and things like that. So if you can repeatedly attack these renters to where they're not making as much income anymore because they're, you know, under siege or whatever, then now they're not bringing in any income, and that might persuade these larger groups to say, all right, we don't care about these systems because we're not making any money off of them, and they're too far away for us to keep putting out the fire in that system. We're just going to focus on these systems that we know produce a lot of income because of the, you know, the moons or the passive income that they provide. So we're going to focus our defenses on these systems and just, you know, let this other system fall, which then enables smaller groups to live in that system to help make the space feel more alive and, you know, people doing things and not just bots and renters.
Nice. What do you think about improving the moons in Wormhole?
Yeah, for sure. I think now, obviously, you have to go about it carefully. We don't want to overbuff them because wormholes obviously have a lot of good income potential already, at least with the higher class.
Higher hand, yeah.
Right, but I think low class is a good opportunity, and my perspective has always kind of been that I think high class should be where you make a lot of the blue loot, and then low class is more where you make a lot of salvage and have better industrial opportunities. So maybe you could have the better moons in the low class holes, which would then provide more incentive for people to live in the low class, doing industry, getting salvage, whereas in the high class it's more focused on the higher end PvE, you know, where you're getting the blue loot, but obviously it's more risky, and, you know, kind of go in that perspective.
I like it. I really do. What are the two biggest things that that EVE needs right now?
In general, and this, I know this is a broad, vague answer, but it needs a shakeup. And more specifically, we need objectives. So right now, a lot of EVE and specifically nullsec, I mean maybe even wormholes to some extent, feel kind of stagnant. We're kind of stuck in the status quo, and you know, we have these really large groups that have just masses of members and ships, and you know, granted, recently they had a super huge fight with trillions of ISK lost, so that's great, but that doesn't happen a whole lot, and I'd like to see that happen a whole lot more. And I want to see movement start to occur where there's a lot of people fighting and trying to take systems, and just that kind of back and forth of, you know, we own this system now, and then, you know, someone's like, no, you don't. Now I own this system. And obviously there's a lot of things that need to change with that, but I want more reasons for people to fight. There needs to be something that says, I want this system, I'm going to take it from you, or I don't like you and I'm going to blow you up. You know, and I just feel like that's kind of missing right now.
Do you have like any suggestion of like something that could be like adding those goals? Because like in the last expansion we got some new tools on the corporation side to put goals, system specifics in a wide area of the game. So like, what would those new goals feel like?
So we already kind of talked about one of them, which was the return of passive income. So that would be like a primary goal. I think to some extent, reworking citadels to some degree to where they're not feeling so grindy, to where you don't feel like you're committing, weeks to destroy a citadel that may not even be all that valuable, so you can progress through a system. If citadels don't have limitations and you can spam as many of them as you want, then I kind of feel like they should be faster to destroy. At least maybe the smaller ones. Obviously, keep stars and forts might be a little bit more resistant, and can have better timers and things like that. But like Astras and refineries and things like that, I don't think really need to be super grindy. We can bring back structure services. We can bring back ways to disrupt Ansiblex, or the big topic is obviously fatigue. And me personally, I think fatigue might be the end result, but I don't think it's necessarily the first step we need to go after, because I just don't think really the ecosystem is set up for it. And on top of that, I think there needs to be some more changes to nullsec before we can really go after Ansiblexes, and that is, I really think there needs to be more customization of like Sov and what you can do with your Sov. For example, more structures that define the system and what you want it to do. Like just a rough idea I've had is like, what if you could capture a storm, and then you gain the benefits and maybe gain certain penalties when you capture a storm within that system, and that spawns new PvE, that spawns new exploration, that spawns new mining sites, things like that. Or maybe your passive income is derived off of you following a storm. So that just opens up a lot of different play styles, a lot of different objectives that, again, provide things for people to do and things for people to fight over.
No, I like that. Like following the storm, like I just imagine like here in winter, like getting like ice belts from like another place than like the region that you are like currently. So that could be quite interesting for like those that are chasing those isotopes from calorie space but live in the Mar and those kind of things.
Right, exactly. Or even like if you're a smaller group, because a larger group, it's going to be harder for them to follow something, because they want to kind of protect their own space. But if you're a nomadic group or a small group, it might be more beneficial for you to follow a storm and also set up your own doctrine to take advantage of the bonuses and penalties of the storm while still making passive income, from the special sites or whatever the case may be. I think storms are one of those things that CCP implemented that have a lot of potential. They're just not really capitalizing on it. And obviously the storm AI needs to be worked on. Sometimes they linger in places they shouldn't for too long, but I think there's a lot of potential there to have some interesting dynamics.
Nice. You've been speaking about like nomadic gameplay. How do you actually see a real nomadic gameplay implemented in EVE, and what would that look like?
Well, we kind of already have it to some degree. It's just not very widespread. Normally people are utilizing orcas and like a deep safe, or they're using a mobile depot. And I think you could probably expand on that by having like FOBs or forward operating bases that provide, a more static defense that's a little bit more robust than a mobile depot or an orca, something that allows you to dock and refit, but doesn't have a ton of defensive capabilities, but is also not overly expensive. It just, provides you with some quality of life, and it can easily be brought down or picked up and moved along as you kind of follow whatever you're trying to do. And I think that would enable more nomadic groups, because again, we already see that already with people with orcas, but I think that could maybe expand it to be more the people who are doing nomadic stuff with orcas are typically more solo or solo with alts, and I'd like to see it expand more to a group of people, not necessarily a large group, but 5, 10 guys doing it. And I think you would just need to provide the structures to be able to do that.
Yeah, because we saw in the last months some lore about the Minmatar getting mobile forge on something. So being able to do like basic industry, like on the go with those groups, so that they can like anchor X type of structure, so that they can do some industry there while they are set up their camp for I don't know like 2 weeks in any given place, and after that they can like wrap up the camp and just go their merry way to the next spot.
Right, which I mean, for Minmatar, the lore behind that would be the Thuckers, and so I mean that all kind of goes right along with each other, So you could make structures or ships or whatever based around them, and then you would have at least it would match the lore, and then you would have an actual kind of nomadic type playstyle you could entertain or see how it works.
Yeah, because in the lore, like the Tucker tribes got like a huge caravan that has been speaking of, but we never saw like the actual model. We got some fan art about it, but like this kind of thing is a gameplay that would be like really, really nice to have.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And it gives more options for smaller groups to explore other parts of Eve. Because my perspective is I feel like a lot of groups get stuck either in high sec or low sec, and they don't really have somewhere to progress. Like you have wormholes, but wormholes are kind of a whole different ballpark. You have logistics involved. You have no local. There's completely different PVE, and some groups might not want to make the jump to that. So if you had something else that enabled a small group to kind of expand their horizons, I feel like that would be beneficial to retention to some degree.
Yeah. And also, I don't see like the whole Minmatar caravan trying to get through a wormhole.
Right.
Like mass limitation and stuff.
Just a little.
A little. Okay. What would be the one thing in the game that if it's changed during your time as a CSM member, you would consider your term a real success?
So that's difficult. I don't know if I have necessarily a single thing. I think what I would say is a success is probably more broad of just we have more people fighting. So that's maybe too vague for an answer, but I think that's how I would view it from at least if we're saying if something is a success is, I want to see more movement happening. I want to see people fighting. I want to see people having fun or exploring their own play styles and just again having fun.
Yeah, we got people in the chat saying like the Minmatar caravan. Nice. So before we go into the last question, do you have like any topics that you would like us to discuss?
I don't think so, but yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these topics have been pretty good. I could talk ship balance for decades, but I don't think we have enough time for that, so we'll leave it as it is. So yeah, we can move on.
Great. So last question: why should Canucks and friends vote for you?
So obviously, I have a fairly long track record of getting changes implemented, which are not specifically small gang focused, even though I am a small gang solo player. I look at Eve more as the big picture. I want everyone to try and have fun, and if something needs to be changed, I want to try and find the middle ground or the compromise first before we, potentially go to the nuclear option. And I think just the perspective I provide is more unique and kind of finds some of the underlying issues that people might overlook, and just a different way to balance things instead of the same old, the things that are on the surface that everyone wants to go after instead of the underlying issues.
Nice. Well, Stitch, thanks a lot for your time. It was a pleasure. So, like, all of you, Canucks and friends, we do invite you to leave a subscribe and a like to the video. We'll get like all the questions with timestamp just beneath, and you can just click on it to get to the answer that you want. So on this, I'm gonna wish you a really great day, everyone, and see you in the next video. Au revoir.